Hi, everyone. This is Sam Silverman, Managing Partner of EB5AN. Thank you for taking time to join today's webinar. Today, we're going to be discussing our Crestwind Rocky River Rural EB5 loan project. And we have the pleasure of having Tarun from India, a recent EB5 investor in the project, who's graciously offered to share a few minutes of his time and share a little bit about his experience hiring an EB5 immigration attorney, as well as doing research on potential regional center investment projects and why he ended up choosing the attorney he went with and the Rocky River Rural EB5 project. So to start with, Tarun, could you share a little bit about your background, your experience in the US, and kind of what led you to decide to pursue an EB5 investment for a permanent green card?
Yeah, sure. So I have been in the US for approximately 4.5 years. Came here to do my master's. I am originally from India, Midwestern part of it. You could call it like it's close to Mumbai. And yeah, I just came for a master's now, currently working in a tech company.
Okay, got it. And so having been here for some time, you decided you wanted to stay long term. And what were some of the different options that you looked at in addition to EB5?
Yeah, so currently my visa status has been on like a student visa, which is like STEM OPT. And so there were a couple of options. So one was the H1B, the other one was the O1 route as well, which is could be later termed as like EB1A. So this was like my third attempt with H1B, so I really didn't have any luck with getting an H1B. But I had explored like O1 as well for the extraordinary talent, and a couple of my friends have gone through that process. And by evaluating that option, and like for EB1A, it was like I was not the right fit for that particular visa. So that was the gist of the visas I had like explored, but also like even when I thought about the long term like plan in the US, I've seen my friends go through H1B. And what H1B comes with is like eventually you have to go through that entire process of eventually waiting for the green card, which is like I think 20, 30, or maybe 100 years, what people say. And what I've usually seen is, and in my past 2 years, where majority of layoffs have happened across tech, I've seen that it creates a lot of uncertainty for users, like especially people in the United States, where you have just 60 days to find a new job. It's not good for like it's a very limited time to find a job. Plus, it is a very unstable position to be in. So those are the options I considered. And looking at that, hey, I'm not eligible for even O1 or EB1A. And even if I get an H1B, the end goal, like if I want to stay here in the long term, it is not going to be satisfied with H1B. So that is when I decided like which is the other visa option, which maybe I have a shot at. And that's how I discovered the EB5 program.
Got it. Okay, and so once you'd kind of come to that analysis, that EB5 was going to be the best path forward for you to stay in the United States long term. What did you do then? What was your experience like kind of researching for a potential immigration attorney to help you, navigate that application process?
Got it. Yeah. So I get like it's a funny story, like how I discovered even EB5. I actually didn't know 6 months before I made the investment that there is some category called as EB5. So it just happened to be discussed over like a conversation with a friend, and just mentioned it randomly that one of his friend is going through EB5. And then this was late May, where once I got to know about that, and then I used like EB5AN's like all the videos. I probably didn't sleep for 2 days, and just went through all the videos for like what does the process look like, where do you make an investment, what is this thing called source of funds, so the entire thing of it. And then I spoke to my wife that this looks like a good option that if you want to pursue. And she said, like, yeah, okay, let's go ahead and do it. Then we decided to come to an attorney. Like, okay, let's hire an attorney. Let's at least get this process started. So for the attorney, I had like specifically like 4 parameters to like select the attorney. So one was the number of cases that the attorney has had, because in a term, like I wanted to be like, hey, there are a good number of cases that an attorney has seen. So even if there's an R fee or something like that, which we get in the future, the attorney would be able to resolve that. And the second one was like the number, like the success rate. Even though attorney might handle a number of cases, but fails everything, that doesn't matter, right? So, which was really important was that, like how many cases has the attorney filed, how many were successful, and third is what the most, like I feel the most interesting was I was specifically looking at, because at the time I was filing the EB5, it was during the election time, so I wanted someone who has gone through at least the 2 administration cycle, like who has filed cases under Democrats and who has filed cases under Republicans. Because as we have seen that the legal landscape changed very rapidly with one versus the other. So wanted to see that, hey, someone who has experience in dealing with these two. And the fourth criteria, which was, I think, specific to us, was the source of funds. We were initially planning to use a property in India as a source of funds. So we wanted someone who has that specific knowledge on, because it was a very like a complicated selling process in India, and there are multiple challenges. So we wanted someone who has like experience in dealing with those situations. So yeah, like to summarize, there were 4 parameters: number of cases, success rate, different administration, and the source of funds. Like after looking through these 4 criteria, I kind of narrowed down on then going ahead and searching. Like, okay, these are the 4 criteria. This is what I'm looking for. Who would be the best fit for it? So luckily, I spoke to Anaita and she met all the criteria. So it was like talking to Anaita, even in the first call, explaining her the situation, like this is what the source of funds look like, this is the property, and getting to know her. I was like, okay, I didn't need to explore anyone else. So I just went ahead with Anaita and didn't explore any other attorneys for that matter.
Okay, got it. Okay, perfect. So once you had made up your mind, that Anita was going to be the best fit for you,
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about what that process was like after you decided to hire her, before you were ready to submit your application. How long did it take, back and forth, document exchange, questions? What was that experience like?
So because I like when you look at the timelines, right? May I did the research, hired an attorney, like hired Anaita in I probably say June. And this was particularly for that reason, that for the source of funds of selling a property back in India, which was a bit complicated. So that's when I thought that, okay, I need this, because I was planning to make that investment in the next kind of 6 months or 5 to 6 months, but I needed that specific help for that particular property. But if you go to look at it, like if you have source of funds in the US, it is pretty straightforward. And eventually we didn't end up using the property as a source of funds. We only used the US source of funds, and it was pretty fast, pretty quick. Like I probably say it was like around 1 or 2 weeks, just getting everything ready. So the delay doesn't happen on the attorney side. Like Anata is pretty quick, pretty responsive. I don't know, like I've sent her messages at like I was in India and I sent a message at 11, like whatever, and it was very late in the US, but still she's on call, like, and replying. So she's been very responsive. So that's why I think the entire process was very straightforward. And if you have just US source of funds, the entire process becomes kind of seamless for you.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense because you're using all US documents. All right, so having kind of recently gone through that source of funds process with a US attorney, what advice, what suggestions would you have for someone else considering EB-5 in terms of picking an attorney? Now knowing what criteria you used and then how that ended up panning out with the attorney that you hired.
Yeah, I think out of the four which I mentioned, right, like three may be generalized and applicable to like everyone who wants to make an investment, like the number of cases, the success rate, and different administrations. The fourth one is very kind of subjective. It is, hey, if you are someone from like China and someone has an experience, and if you're using that kind of source of like funds and using a property, the decision might change for you. But eventually, if you have like, if it's just US and you have this all the three different criteria on the top, which I mentioned earlier, I would just say that just go with Anayata. And I think it's a no-brainer.
Okay, perfect. All right, so shifting gears and now talking a little bit more about the regional center and the projects. So first, let's talk a little bit about regional centers. So as you kind of explored potential companies to work with, obviously regional centers have one project or more than one project at a time. But at the regional center level, what was your experience kind of conducting some research on potential regional centers, including EB5AN, in terms of what company you wanted to really work with, and what the difference was that you found after talking to a few different companies?
So even for this, my situation might be very like kind of unique, as I spoke to just EB5AN. Like when I started my initial research in like May, my entire research was based on EB5AN's like YouTube videos, the website, and got to know a lot of information. So I was like, hey, these guys know this stuff. They have the credentials, they know this stuff. They've been doing this for 10 years. As I said, like the similar criteria which I picked for attorney like applies to EB5AN. So I was like, okay, these folks meet both the like all the criteria that I was looking for. Like basically, okay, you have worked in a different administration. You what is the kind of the success rate? How do you pick? What is your philosophy on like picking developers and deciding to work with them? So you are always looking for kind of the best interest for the client that you're working with. Like for instance, this me as an investor in doing all the pre-qualification that is already needed to be done. So I don't have to do that, right? I don't have to be like, okay, how is Coulter or any other developer? Because you've already done the due research, like pre-qualification on your part. What I just need to do is like, hey, okay, if I pick Coulter as a developer, what is the track record? What's the history? How have they been successful? What has been their strategy to getting to sales? And how do they pick the markets? What is the segment that they operate in? So that is what my research is was very like streamlined, and maybe for the fact like even made it much more easy. Like, hey, just working with EB5AN, they've done all the research, they've picked the good projects for you. Now you have to just decide between, hey, you want to pick a rural project or a urban project.
And on that side, as you were considering both urban and rural projects, what was important to you when you kind of made the decision to focus more on rural projects versus urban?
Yeah, so the again, it goes back to the same question, like, okay, what is the criteria, right? For what do you want from this? Eventually you want a green card and you want the money to be to reduce the risk level of that money so you can get it back sometime in the future. So what I was looking at specifically is, okay, specifically the three criteria. Okay, when do I get my money back? How much risk is involved? And the green card timelines. So I was really narrowing down between two of the projects specifically, was the One Tampa and the Rocky River, and applying these three criteria to both of them. So I believe there was a US lawsuit, which is, I think, going on how probably your money is linked to your green card, even for the urban project for like investors from India. So probably that brings the question to the first question: when do you get your money back? So it would, if that is true, then probably you'll get the money back at the same time, whether you invest in a rural or whether you invest in an urban. The second one was how much risk is involved, like who's the developer. So I believe both of them was Coulter. So the risk was, okay, yeah, they have great track record, they have done everything, and so that is also sorted. It came down to basically the third point, which is when do you get your green card? So which is much faster in a rural area because of the much more allocation for like the Indian and the Chinese investors. So it nearly came to that point where, okay, if I invest now, when do I actually get my conditional green card, path to green card, and eventually the citizenship?
Got it. Okay. And so that explains the rural piece of it. What about the Rocky River project specifically? Did you feel was compelling in terms of business model and, single family home community versus some of the other rural projects that we see in the market that are kind of large, single hotels or resorts? What about that project kind of made you feel more confident in the financial safety?
I think the first reason is definitely Coulter. Seeing the history of what they target, and they've already been successful. So I was planning, like Twin Lakes was one of the projects, but just I think the loan of that at the point I was investing, there were already too many investors. So I was like, okay, I was very keen to invest in like Twin Lakes, but which is a very similar project to Twin Lakes. It is basically Rocky River. It has all the parameters, like it's closer to the airport. It has whatever you need to have a good, like a lifestyle for a single family home. That was the second part, like, okay, where they are situated. So that becomes that the question again comes down to the point, like, hey, so in order to get your money back, will they be able to sell the projects? So given Coulter's like track record, I was like, okay, they can build it. Can they sell it? So we have seen that with Twin Lakes and every other property that they are able to sell it. And the way they look at markets and the positioning that they do is like closer to the airport, closer, and makes it much more easier for people to make the buying decision that, hey, this is the like right home for me. It's a trusted developer. I get the vicinity to the airport, and yeah, that's the criteria when I was looking at like, hey, why would I pick Rocky River over any other kind of rural project? Because it primarily comes down to, hey, they've done this project in the past, they know what they're doing, and they know that's it's like probability of success. I know that the probability of success is much more higher with Rocky River when I invest with them.
Got it. And you mentioned Coulter a couple of times. What about Coulter in particular just made you feel comfortable that the project's going to get built and that money is going to be repaid on time under the loan?
So it goes back to their past performance and the way they've handled projects in the past. I think Twin Lakes was also built by them. So it is, like we say in the stock market, right? Like not all past performance does not determine future performance, but in this case, you're just trying to reduce your probability of failure. So I have all the information that Coulter has done. I have seen the projects that they've built in the past, and I know that they are being successful. So it just becomes like kind of I wouldn't say an easy, but a straightforward kind of a decision where it's okay. Like, hey, you know this developer, you know the track record, the history, and the way they build the projects and the way they sell it is going to be fine. That's just based on the past record. I don't know if it goes to like, okay, Rocky River turns out to be not good of a project, but this is just based on like the past performance and the data that I had on Coulter.
Perfect. All right. And so, once you kind of decided source of funds was completed with your immigration attorney and you decided on the Rocky River project as the rural project you wanted to focus on, tell us a little bit about the subscription process, signing the contract, transferring the funds to escrow. How long did that take? Was it a smooth process? What was that like before your application was actually submitted?
Yeah, so I think it was pretty seamless. So I think when I started my research back in May, I had been in constant touch with Patrick. So I was like, hey, I was planning to telling him that, hey, I was planning to invest in Twin Lakes, but if any other projects comes up, and by the time I make that investment, which you think is like that, please let me know. So I think Patrick was absolutely like fantastic in just providing the updates. Like, okay, this is what you're looking for. This is the risk level, or it was more of a. I think what this is my own like personal perspective. I'm not spoken to any other like regional center, but if you're going through this process, which is like is probably close to $1 million that you're putting in. So you need more of a guide who has been through this process, who's guiding you through the way. And I feel that Patrick and you were really like helpful in just showing me, okay, which projects are there, what is the risk level associated with it, and additionally, like making the process so fast that even I was like, okay, I don't have a reference point, but it was very fast. Like within 2 weeks, we assigned. You sent me the documents, assigned it, you uploaded it, the funds were transferred, and it was done. So I think that was really great from an experience standpoint. Like from an experience standpoint, it was very great. And I didn't think I had any. I don't think it's not. Sorry, let me rephrase that. I didn't have any complaints, to be honest, with EB5AN. I believe they exceeded whatever expectations I initially even had. So yeah, it was like absolutely great working with EB5AN.
Thank you. We really appreciate that. So now, kind of looking back, your application's been filed. Everything's finished. What kind of general advice would you have for other Indian investors in the U.S. Considering EB5? What should they think about? Is it worth exploring it seriously? And yeah, just what general thoughts would you have for someone in a similar position as you?
I think let's go back to that question. And hey, so is this when you actually compare this investment on the face of it, it looks like a close to $1 million invest. Like it is actually like kind of goes to $1 million because you're investing 800, you're paying the attorney, you're removing the funds, the subscription details, and everything. It goes close to like $1 million. But if you actually see the investment amount is more than that. Like if you had kept this money in the S&P 500, that would have given you, and the delta of when you're investing the money and taking back that money, the delta over 30 years is probably around $8 million. So it's not the $1 million you're investing. If you look at 30 years, it's probably $8 million, which you're kind of looking at, because the S&P 500 gives you like a 10% return, assuming you get a 10% return every year. In year zero, you'll have you've invested that money, but in year 7, when you probably get back your money, that money is already gone to 2 million, where you are now kind of investing 1 million. So when you calculate that over 30 years, it's probably like around $8 million. So it's a lot of amount when you're talking about, okay, you're investing this amount of money. So I would suggest like do your research, uh, look at your situation of where you are in. If there's other options that you want to explore, like going through the H1B or O1 or EB1A route, that is fine. That is fine, but like explore the options, know what you're getting from an EB5 kind of investment. And but the process is great in the terms of sense that, hey, if you don't have any other options, it's specifically like targeted towards people who don't fit, maybe H1B is taking too long, then don't fit the O1 EB1A criteria, and just want some like stability in life and just a peace of mind, right? So then it comes down to the same question, like what is the cost of like peace of mind? So I think it's a very personal decision. I thought, yeah, going ahead with this investment is just probably the great thing to do. Given that, hey, okay, it's $1 million, I probably can go to India and retire with that money, but I didn't want to. So I was like, okay, let's, and I wanted to work. So I was like, this is the best option for me. And it was a very personal experience from how I made this decision for EB5. But to summarize, and overall, it is a great opportunity for folks to stay in the United States long term. And I would suggest like look at your criteria for finalizing an attorney, look at the criteria for finalizing your regional center, and just if you think it's the right thing to go ahead with EB5, definitely go ahead with that.
Perfect. All right. And now, again, having gone through the process, selecting a NIDA and working with EB5AN on the Rocky River Rural Project, would you recommend going with a NIDA and EB5AN to other investors, and why?
I would definitely like recommend. I don't think you need to look any further. Just go ahead with Anita and EB5, like Anita as the attorney and EB5AN as a like a regional center. Everyone. So one of the things which I kind of wanted to bring back to were the parameters, which is, hey, like even for the attorneys, and it applies to the regional center as well. Like is the amount of transparency and the responsiveness, which I realized after going through this process. Like it was not initial part of my criteria, but when I went through this process, I'm like, uh, holy crap, that these people reply within like 2 minutes or so. But I've dealt with lawyers or any other people in like tech companies, they probably take a week. And I realized that how important that is because when you're making that investment, you definitely need a guide. Like you need someone to rely, like, hey, yeah, okay, whatever they're saying is the right thing to do. They're willing to guide you through the entire process, which becomes very important because the investment is so huge. And I think, to be honest, I don't have any other like a reference point, but for whatever experience I had or whatever I expected from that experience was definitely exceeded by both like Anahita and you guys at EB5AN. So for me, if I was to recommend someone or a friend or anyone, I would definitely send them to your way and Another's way.
Perfect. Thank you. We really appreciate you taking some time today to share your experience. As you mentioned earlier, you had a chance to watch a lot of the other testimonial videos, and everyone kind of brings a different perspective, a different opinion, and we just really think that's helpful for other investors in similar situations to have the opportunity to hear, how other people, with similar life situation thought through the decision to do EB5, but also, thought through which particular attorney was best suited for them, and also which project was going to be the best fit based on their immigration and financial goals. So yeah, thank you, Tarun. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Sam. Like really great, like working with the entire process with you.